Welcome back to the Glacier guys. I'm here with my co-host,
Joey.
And today we have a very special episode. We are joined by fellow classmate, Jack Zampillo. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Glad to be on.
No problem, man. Jack, you have a podcast of your own you've been writing for a while. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's going on about 2 years now that I've really got into MMA. My podcast is about MMA, the UFC mostly. But yeah, it's been about 2 years that I've been watching MMA religiously, and it's been a little over a year that I've been writing and podcasting. It was kind of cool how it started, actually. I just got involved, got myself entrenched in MMA Twitter, and I started writing, articles just on my own, putting myself out there just to see if anybody noticed me. And a small company out of Philadelphia called Scraptitude, and a guy named Tim Lewis, he noticed me, and things kind of just took off from there. I started writing for them, started my own podcast, and now obviously I have the Z and Clay show that I do with my friend Clay Wakeman, so everything's going really well. I'm excited for the future, and it's just been a lot of great experience with the podcast and the writing. So
that's awesome. And you said just 2 years ago you heavily got into UFC, or have you been watching it like kind of here and there for most of your life, or you just really just got into it?
I really just got into it. I was at Western Michigan my freshman year of college, and I had this buddy named Jake who, was watching it all the time and really try and get me into it. And, I'd watch it here and there with him, and then I think it was the Conor Habib card. I really followed the build-up to that.
Really?
You guys remember how crazy that build-up was?
Yeah, that was insane.
And then after that, it was kind of like there was Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega. That was an incredible fight.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, UFC 232, John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson, the rematch. I don't know if you guys remember their first fight. It was super close. John Jones won by a controversial decision.
Yeah.
And that was the first card that I really watched from top to bottom. That was the first card where I couldn't take my eyes off the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, my love and passion for the sport has just grown. So.
I'll tell you what, that's literally the perfect time to get into MMA, honestly.
Yeah, that was a hell of a rematch, and it was a great card. Amanda Nunes, I don't know if you guys remember, she went up against Chris Cyborg.
Oh, my God. That was supposed to be like her biggest challenge up to date. Yeah.
We were talking about that after the last Nunes fight.
Yeah.
Well, Cyborg was supposed to win that fight.
Right.
Yeah.
And Amanda Nunes was moving up to 145 pounds.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it wasn't only the fact that she beat her, but the way in which she did it. Going out there and throwing herself right into the fire, knocking her out cold within the first minute and a half.
Yeah.
It was just an incredible performance, and it solidified Amanda Nunes as the greatest of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Cyborg was known as the girl, in that weight class especially. A lot of people didn't even give Nunes a chance, honestly. So.
No. And then Nunes, she effectively ended Ronda Rousey's UFC career as well, right?
Yeah.
And that was a very, very sweet moment looking back on it. I'm not a big fan of Ronda Rousey, the way that she handled herself, within the UFC, kind of the way she went out, watching Amanda Nunes knock her out the way that she did. It was a very good sight to see.
After the Holly Holm fight, it was kind of apparent that Ronda was a little broken, but I agree. Just the way she handled herself, it was like, man, how did the biggest star of the UFC at the time, arguably, and just to fall off so fast, it was crazy to see that.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, the way that she blamed her fans for a lot of that. I don't know how much you guys follow it, but she blamed her fans very heavily for the way that she went out. And in my opinion, that's just not the way, you go out of a UFC career.
No, I think it was more just her putting so much pressure on herself. Just ever since she got into the UFC, she was always the top dog.
Right, because she
just couldn't handle the adversity, honestly.
Yeah. Seriously. Once she got challenged, it just showed that she couldn't really keep her own in the UFC in general.
Which is kind of crazy. You don't really see that much with fighters nowadays.
No.
A lot of the time, they're always egging for that rematch after they lose, after going on such a long streak. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
But I think the way that she got dominated, you see, when Conor lost to Poirier, obviously, he's like, all right, we're gonna run it back, whatever. Even with Adesanya, he moved up and he lost, and he was undefeated before, but he's like, this isn't gonna faze me,
Take it like a champ.
Exactly.
But I don't know. She just kind of. When she lost to Holly Holm, she kind of just lost all confidence. She just never was the same.
No
afterwards.
doubt.
I know she wasn't the youngest after that. She just kept getting older. But,
Yeah, I mean, a loss can do great things for a fighter, and a loss can also be very detrimental to a fighter. And I talk about it all the time. 90% of the game is mental. You know,
no doubt.
You can be the strongest, most powerful guy or girl in the world, but if you go in there with anything less than being 100% up here, your chances of winning a fight and succeeding on the biggest of stages, like Ronda was up against, you know, with Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes, her chances of succeeding deplete significantly.
Mm-hmm. And you do have a team behind you, but when you go in there, like, that's why UFC is so crazy, because it's just you versus the other person. Exactly. You know, that's why it is so mental. I agree 100%.
Yeah. How important do you think like a build up to the fight is? Like, do you think it can intimidate a fighter like either way? Like just from hearing what the other fighter's saying about you, like on interviews and stuff?
Oh, definitely. I think that, you know, intense buildups to a fight really tests both fighters' mental strength. You know, you talked about Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. Mm-hmm. One of the things that, you know, they fought back in 2014 at featherweight. They were both very young in their careers. That was kind of Conor's coming out party, I would say. Dustin talked about all the time, you know, the build-up to that fight was very, very intense. They were going back and forth on fight week, you know, in the hotel lobby. It was just you know, they didn't like each other at that point in time. And Poirier talks about it all the time, that he lost that fight before he even stepped into the octagon.
Right.
I believe that Conor McGregor lost the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight before he even stepped into the octagon. We talked about how crazy the build-up for that one was. So, you know, I think that, yes, a build-up and a, you know, intense back and forth kind of build up to a fight can have an effect on your mentality stepping inside the octagon, because fact of the matter is, if that guy standing across from you is talking a bunch of crap your way, it could have an impact on your mentality. You know, sometimes that gets to fighters.
Yeah, and I think it, like when Conor was talking about like to Khabib, I think that fired him up in the right way for him. But then you look at somebody like Jose Aldo, and I think he lost that fight before it even started.
Oh, definitely. Conor definitely got into Jose Aldo's head.
No doubt.
Weeks, months before that fight was supposed to happen. You know, what happened with that fight too, McGregor and Aldo were scheduled to fight.
Right.
And
yep.
He had to pull out of that fight a couple weeks before. Conor McGregor wound up winning the interim belt off of Chad Mendes. Mm-hmm. And right when that happened, all the attention shifted Conor's way. It was like Conor was the undisputed champion, and Jose Aldo was kind of just
an afterthought,
hiding in the shadows, right? And so, you know, in the build-up to that fight, Aldo felt like he wasn't the champion because Conor went into Brazil, called himself the King of Rio, you know, in front of all of his people and essentially embarrassed him. And the shot that put Jose Aldo out is a shot that he's been able to take before and weather before. Mm-hmm. So it is 100% correct to say that Jose Aldo lost that fight before he stepped in the octagon.
No doubt. And even with like the shenanigans, like Conor taking his belt before the fight and all that, it's just like you could see that he was clearly a deer in headlights by the time they got in the octagon together. No doubt.
Yeah, I think he definitely totally took him out of his element and his game plan. Like he honestly probably didn't even hear his coaches and like for like the
no doubt, yeah,
few seconds that the fight.
Well, it was 12 seconds, right?
Yeah, it didn't last very long, but he definitely just was completely out of his mind when he got in there.
And that Mendes fight, it was with Conor. That was a pretty close fight, right?
It was.
Conor almost lost earlier in the fight.
Yeah, he was getting beat up a little bit on the ground. Mm-hmm. Chad Mendes landed a couple nice elbows from top position, but as soon as Conor was able to get back to his feet, he recognized that Chad Mendes tired himself out trying to get that finish on the ground.
Right.
Conor landed a couple nice shots to the body and was able to finish the fight with a beautiful left hand. Mm-hmm. You know, and that performance alone and McGregor's performances prior to that goes back to people recognizing Conor as the undisputed champ when he was in reality just the interim champ.
Right.
But he had that aura about him, that superstar, that name equity behind him, that he was just able to do the things that he did because Jose Aldo went undefeated for almost 10 years. You know, he ran the featherweight division for almost 10 years, and this guy comes in and stops it in 13 seconds. Yeah. It's crazy. And, you know, the significance of that performance will never be weighed as greatly as it should be. I talk about it all the time that Conor McGregor is the biggest what if in UFC history. The run that he went on at featherweight is one of the best runs in UFC history.
No doubt.
But I think with the way that Conor has handled the past few years of his career, and depending on how this third fight goes with Poirier, you're really going to start to see this newer generation of MMA fans not recognize Conor McGregor for what he is and was.
Right.
They're going to think of him more as like an entertainer than like an actual fighter, you know what I mean? Like not recognize his accolades as much more than recognize his Rolls Royce that he pulls up in before the fight.
I actually have a bold prediction that Conor McGregor is going to finish his combat sports career in the WWE.
Really?
I do. I think that as soon as it's apparent that and I'm not talking soon. Depending on what happens in the Poirier fight, I think if he loses that fight, he may retire, actually.
Yeah.
But if he wins that fight and goes on to become the lightweight champion or get a couple more wins and compete at the top of the UFC like he did once before, I think we'll see it a few years down the line. But I think that McGregor has the mindset of, I'm going to do what I can to make the most amount of money, that if Vince McMahon or whoever's running the WWE at that time came to him and said, hey, Conor, we'll drop you this big of a bag to make this many appearances.
Right.
I don't see why Conor wouldn't take that opportunity.
Yeah, and you can't really blame him either. It's not like money's an issue for Conor, but, I mean, if he's done in the UFC, there's no way he's going to be out of the spotlight or even want to be out of the spotlight.
Exactly. Honestly, I feel like he's a businessman first at this point. So
yeah, no doubt.
He's definitely going to do whatever is going to make him money, of course. And it's not like this is like an unheard of move either. Like, we've seen people go from the UFC to the WWE plenty of times. So
Most recently, Cain Velasquez, former UFC heavyweight champion, after he lost his last fight to Francis Ngannou, he kind of just said, you know what? I love the WWE. He started training, preparing his body for that type of, what it requires, the type of energy and the type of athleticism that it requires, because it's different, right? WWE, you're doing backflips, you're jumping off of stuff, you're getting hit with, fake chairs. You know what I mean? It's a lot to prepare for. So, people that say that it's an easy transition, I would heavily disagree with that, because
it's a show they're putting on.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot that goes into that. Seriously.
Yeah.
They get thrown through tables and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
And you're doing flips off the.
A lot of it. I mean, it's fake fighting, but I mean, it's still taxing on your body.
You're jumping off 12-foot ladders.
Yeah.
It's like there's some crazy stuff that they do.
And accidents have happened before where people fall and they've literally lost their lives. So it's like, you're still taking a risk.
I actually listened to a story that, I don't know if you guys remember, the big fight. I don't know what WrestleMania it was, but between John Cena and The Rock.
Okay.
And The Rock, I heard an interview that he was doing, and he was talking about that fight, and they had like 20 minutes to a half hour left in the match. It was a long match, almost an hour.
Okay.
And The Rock was talking about how they were doing this one move, and he felt something just like tear in his, I think it was his leg, or it might have been his shoulder, one of the two. And he talked about, right there, I either could have lied down and taken the injury. And I mean, obviously that's a good excuse, because if you're injured, you're injured. But he talked about, the mental strength that he found within himself to persevere through the rest of that match, getting slammed multiple times after, I think he said he wasn't able to feel his leg or something like that. It was this like fiery, tingly feeling. It was really intense. He the way he was talking about it, he made it seem really intense. So it's a grueling sport. I mean, we call it entertainment, but it is a sport. It requires a certain amount of strength and athleticism, for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah. It definitely doesn't get as much respect as it deserves, like, for sure.
And Vince McMahon's a smart businessman. I mean, he makes a ton of money.
Yeah.
Ton of money.
The longevity that the WWE has is long lasting. Like, they're not going anywhere compared to any other sport.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. So we were talking mental game a little bit earlier. Conor lately, especially before the Poirier fight, he's taken a more, you could say, mature approach to the fights. Do you think the lack of trash talking was detrimental to the fight at all, or what do you think about that? Because a lot of people have been saying that.
I think that's a weak narrative to get behind. I think that's also a very, very played out excuse to make. And, Conor's fan base, and like you said, a lot of people have been, asking those questions. Well, does Conor not have that edge to him anymore? Mm-hmm. And I don't really think it's that. I think over the past few years, we've seen an incredible amount of maturity from Conor McGregor.
I agree 100%.
And I commend him for the changes that he's made in terms of the way he handles himself. Are we ever going to see the Conor McGregor that trash talk and knocked out guys on his way to becoming a double champion ever again? I don't know. But what I do know is that do not underestimate the amount of competitive edge that Conor McGregor still holds under his belt. Just because we don't see the trash talk as much as we once did, just because we don't see him taking guys' belts off the table, disrespecting people, coming at guys at the press conference, getting in their faces, just because we don't see that anymore doesn't mean that Conor McGregor cannot be at the same level that he once was as a fighter. Like I said, I don't think we'll ever see the guy that we saw back in 2014, 15, 16, but I think we can see a more polished version of that if he can look at what he did wrong in that Poirier fight, make those adjustments, and go in with a patient, composed game plan and a measured game plan that doesn't put himself at too much of a risk with those leg kicks. You and I have talked about that before. Yep. I think if he goes in there with the same mindset that he had going into the second fight, with making the adjustments that I know that he will make with him and his team, I don't think there's any reason why we can't see McGregor go on somewhat of a run at lightweight over the next couple of years.
And I'd hope so, too. I mean, that would be massive for the sport in general because McGregor, I mean, he brought the national attention to the UFC in recent years that we've seen now. I mean, there's been other fighters, of course, but he is still arguably the biggest name in UFC. I mean,
yeah, definitely. I mean, every Conor fight, no matter if he talks trash or not, is always going to have the best pay-per-view sells and all that. I mean, I think Conor. I lost my train of thought.
It's fine.
In terms of numbers, nobody has made the UFC more money than Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
And the UFC is a better place when Conor McGregor is active just because of all the attention he brings to the sport.
No doubt.
But I also think as the UFC continues to grow and as more people recognize how awesome of a sport it is, not only to the eyes, right? Because obviously fighting's eye candy, right? Everybody wants to watch two guys go at it, two guys at a high level, beat each other up. There's nothing better than that.
Right.
But when people start to recognize and appreciate the mentality and all the different pieces of a puzzle that have to come together for a fighter to be successful, I think once people understand and appreciate that more, you're going to see the UFC be as big as it is with Conor McGregor with other guys, with guys like Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway. I mean, these guys are big names that have accomplished some great things throughout their career. And once the UFC hits that main global stage, and it's getting there, we're right here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Once it hits that level, you're going to see a lot more. And I guarantee you guys will start to watch more of it too, because I can tell you guys have already gotten more into it, with me kind of, talking about it and telling you guys about it. So, I think that's what it takes too. There are very few people that you'll find around here that are into MMA, and it just takes one or two people to get the word out, and eventually it's going to start spreading like wildfire, man.
It's crazy that you say that because I literally just started getting into the UFC more when it was the Cowboy Conor fight, and the first full card that I watched was the Poirier and McGregor rematch. We watched it at your house, Joe, and that was the first card I watched start to finish, and it was literally just pure entertainment the entire time. So
yeah, I was into it when I was a kid because my dad is a big fan. I used to watch like the original Ultimate Fighters and all that stuff.
Those are the best.
Yeah, with Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell and all that stuff. Yeah.
You ever seen the 30 for 30 on ESPN Plus? Do you have ESPN Plus?
I do. What's the 30 for 30?
Chuck and Tito.
Really?
Yeah.
They have one? I
they
didn't
do.
even know that.
If you go on ESPN Plus, you check that out. I think it's like a little over an hour long. It's one of the best, most entertaining UFC documentaries I've ever watched, just because of how entertaining those guys were going up against each other.
Yeah, those were always interesting fights. Yeah, so I was pretty big into it when I was a kid and stuff, but I kind of around like 2013 to like 2015, 16 a little bit. I kind of like staged out of it a little bit, but I've been getting back into it in like recent years. I've always been a fan of it, though. I think it's one of the most exciting sports that people don't appreciate enough. Definitely.
Let's see. That being said, so we've been talking about McGregor Poirier decent amount already. Third fight predictions. Do you have any so far set in stone, or?
This is a hard one for me, brother. I got to be honest with you. Conor McGregor is what got me into the UFC.
Right. So, yeah. Same here.
Yeah. I'll always have a soft spot for McGregor, and the thing about MMA, when you're a fan of MMA, it's an individualistic sport, right? So there are certain guys that I like that I always want to win, and I'll admit, sometimes my bias and my like for a fighter gets in the way of me making a knowledgeable prediction.
Yeah.
So I thought that in the rematch, McGregor was going to beat him inside 2 rounds. While that wasn't a far-out prediction because McGregor was the favorite, if I would have looked into it a bit more, and you kind of look into the fighter that Dustin Poirier is and everything, and the resume that he holds at 155 pounds, he's beaten guys, at the cream of the crop of the lightweight division, and there was no reason why Poirier couldn't have won that fight, and obviously he did. So for the third fight, my heart says Conor, right?
Too,
my heart and my head wants to say Conor as well. But right now, we're what? It's April. We're 3 months out. My head says Dustin Poirier right now. The southpaw versus southpaw matchup is very tricky for Conor McGregor. It's something that he hasn't seen a lot of over the course of his career. And Dustin Poirier was the first guy to ever exploit the hole that McGregor has in defending leg kicks. And, Poirier talked about it. That was the game plan going into that fight. He was going to chop that lead leg because him and his coaches knew that he was going to be susceptible. Conor was going to be susceptible of those leg kicks. And, it was a beautifully executed game plan. And, when you look at what went wrong on Conor's end, Conor is very, very heavy on his lead leg.
Oh, yeah.
Everything, all his power, the reason why he's able to generate that power so quickly and it looks so effortless is because he leans so heavily on that front leg. So he's already getting 50% of his power, moving forward before he even starts throwing his punch. When you're heavy on that lead leg and someone's chopping at that calf, it's not going to be long before you can't move on that leg anymore, right? And that's exactly what happened to Conor. Conor just couldn't move.
Yeah, you're not going to want to put any weight on that leg after a while.
No, and he was literally limping. He could barely walk. He had crutches.
He left the arena on crutches.
Yeah, the longer that fight went on, the more he would have been exploited. Like, of course, obviously, but I think Poirier kind of started to figure him out in the middle of the second round or so. He kind of
before that. I think.
You could tell. You could tell he was starting to counter everything he was doing.
And you could tell too what threw Conor off was that takedown in the first round that Poirier got.
Yeah,
that takedown wasn't meant to finish the fight. He wasn't looking to submit Conor, in the first round, even though he would have if he had the opportunity, but he wasn't looking for that. He was looking to show Conor that, hey, there are other aspects to this fight. I'm not just going to stand here and trade punches with you because I am smart enough to know the danger that's coming back my way. And Dustin Poirier is one of the best fighters in the UFC at weathering storms. And he took some hard shots from Conor in that first round, some shots that have put other people, on their butts and ended the night. Poirier just walked right through him. And I think once he realized that he was able to take McGregor's best shots, that just gave him the confidence that he needed to go out there in the second round and get the job done.
He looked so much more loose the second round.
He put his confidence in himself, his abilities, and his coaches. And sometimes that's what you got to do in an MMA fight.
And it's interesting because after the first round, I thought McGregor won that round. I think
he handedly won that round. Yeah. I think what I said was the longer the fight goes on, it's more in Poirier's favor because Conor's such an explosive fighter, especially early in fights. You just kind of gotta escape that and, like you said, weather the storm because there's gonna be a storm most of the time when you fight Conor, especially in the first round. But you just gotta learn to fight past that, and once the fight goes on, you'll be able to start picking up on things.
And I remember we noticed those leg kicks. I just didn't think it would take him out that early in the fight. I thought maybe like third, fourth round that leg would really start going, but it was crazy. Like, I mean, how many did he land? Like somewhere in the mid-teens, low 20s?
Close to, I think, 20.
I will look it up for you right now. But
Okay,
what I will
perfect.
say is that calf kicks have become very prominent in MMA over the past couple years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a strike that, it's honestly one of my favorite strikes in the sport. Some people will tell you that they should be banned, they're too lethal. I don't agree with that at all.
I don't either.
think that if it's a strike that is able to be defended, it should be legal.
And it is able to be
And
defended.
it is able to be defended. Just
Right.
because, people haven't really, or fighters haven't been able to figure out, a clear-cut, effective defense to the kick, doesn't mean that, fighters shouldn't be able to throw it, but it has a significant impact. I mean, it hasn't just been the Conor fight. I mean, there was a fight, it was like a month ago, between bantamweights, Pedro Munoz and Jimmy Rivera. And, Pedro Munoz just battered Rivera's leg, battered his leg, for 3 rounds, and the guy couldn't walk at the end of the fight.
Yeah.
It's just crazy what leg kicks can do to your opponent. They're my favorite strike in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think leg kicks are so like underrated, honestly. Like because for guys who don't have like that maybe like crazy knockout power, it gives you like some sort of advantage to wear a guy down who maybe has more power than you. You know what I mean?
It gives your opponent something else to think about,
Exactly.
right? Because, obviously you're mostly going to be worried about everything that's coming to your head, your face, right? Because that's the stuff that's going to put your lights out.
Right.
So when you got a guy who's in there standing in front of you, consistently chopping at your lead leg or whatever leg it is, it's it's tedious mentally because you have to change your game plan and center it around defending the kicks first before you can attack.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we saw in the McGregor fight, it doesn't take too many of those,
No.
or it doesn't take long
Yeah.
for those things to have an effect on you.
Yeah.
And you're testing someone's mental strength too, also, because after a while, like that can't feel good. And you
No.
might, and
You
it
could
might wanna
see,
make
like,
you
you
break
could
a
almost
little
see it
bit.
on Conor's face, like his attitude shifting in the second round when he knew that leg was giving out.
Yeah, it's got to be so demoralizing after a while when you just can't move the way you want to, and you're just kind of a lot more stationary than you'd like.
And another thing is, I feel like the normal fan, like the typical fan that's watching the fight, doesn't realize how like powerful that can be because, like you said, it's not a punch, like it's not a knockout, it's not flashy, but like over time you're chipping away, and it still is pretty quickly that it's happening.
It's kind of like a body shot in boxing. It's not
Yeah.
what you like want to see, but it'll wear the like that.
And it could
that wins you
fold
fights.
boxers. Like there's been multiple boxers even in recent years that knock people out with body shots. So it's
Yeah.
like exactly.
And there are so many. Well, first of all, I just want to say that Dustin Poirier landed 18 of 21 leg kicks
18
on
of
Conor
20.
McGregor
That's insane.
within 2 rounds. Like I said, once he figured out that was a hole that was able to be exploited in Conor's game, he took advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many variations to leg kicks too. That's the other thing. John Jones throws probably my favorite kick in MMA.
Me too.
And
Me too.
you know which one I'm talking
Yes.
about? It's called the oblique kick. And he takes the back leg and basically just pushes his foot right into your knee.
Mm-hmm.
Basically just stops you in your tracks. And
It's vicious.
I want to point out that John Jones threw a lot of those in his fight with Thiago Santos back in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Thiago Santos, I don't know if you guys know what happened after that fight. Both of his knees, he tore his MCL, ACL, UCL. His knees, he had to have surgery on both of them. Kicks can be detrimental, and Thiago Santos has lost both of his fights since coming back from that one.
Yeah.
So, leg kicks can literally be career altering.
Mhm.
And as they become, especially the calf kicks and the oblique kicks and the, spinning side kicks, there's a bunch of different variations, like I said.
Right.
As fighters learn to use more of these kicks and recognize that, how well that these kicks can bode for them, I think you're just going to see more fighters implement leg kicks even more than punches and head kicks.
As
sometimes.
well they should though. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly it's effective if it's executed properly.
So since we're on the topic of John Jones, what's your temperature on the? I've seen some of your tweets on Twitter. What's your temperature on like him fighting sometime in 2021, whether or not the opponent's anyone?
Are you asking me
Like, do you think that what are the chances that he fights in 2021?
I think the chances of him fighting in 2021 are very slim right now. I said this on my podcast after UFC 260, and I knew it right from when the fight ended, and I kind of thought this was going to happen. It was going to go this direction, before the fight. Just the things that John Jones was saying. But I think that John Jones, I'm 90% sure that John Jones is in the midst of pricing himself out with the UFC right now. He asked for, on Twitter at least, somewhere around $8 to $10 million just to fight Francis Ngannou.
Which isn't happening.
And that's absolutely absurd. This isn't the MLB, which has been around for over 100 years, or the NBA, the NFL, where, I can pay these guys ridiculous amounts of money. Conor McGregor doesn't even get paid close to that amount of money to fight.
Probably half, honestly.
Right. Maybe even less than that.
Yeah.
So when I look at John Jones and what he's doing, I have to say that I respect it, because he is a guy that has been at the top of the UFC for 10 years now.
Yep.
The youngest champion in UFC history. He's beaten the upper echelon of the light heavyweight division. Everybody that the UFC has ever put in front of him, he has beaten.
Yep.
So I get asking for, a significant amount of money. But also, if I'm John Jones, I have to recognize that, and if I'm Francis Ngannou, because Francis Ngannou, I don't want him to wait in the wings, for John Jones to, figure things out with the UFC.
Right, 'cause
that
could be a
months.
while.
It could be a year.
Yeah.
So I do not think that John Jones will be fighting this year, because his next fight has to be for the heavyweight title.
Mm-hmm.
He said he's moving up to that weight class. I don't see him going back down to 205 pounds.
He looks like he's at heavyweight right now.
Absolutely. And he's documented on a podcast a couple days ago, and I actually just watched the video today, him saying that he will not, he doesn't want to fight for the UFC if it's not for the amount of money that he wants. So that's either a bargaining chip, or he really means that and he's not going to take anything less. And I think it's the latter half. I really do. And Dana's not going to overpay John Jones, because, quite frankly, he doesn't need John Jones.
No. They're both very stingy people, as we've been seeing. It was funny seeing the April Fool's Day tweets between them. I was like, because I did believe it for a little bit. We were sending in our group chat. I'm like, unreal, man. It's
my buddy Clay believed it, the one that I did the podcast with.
Yeah.
He was like, did you see, Dana and John Jones, they had dinner. And I'm like, dude, did you not see the 4 or 5 tweets he tweeted after that?
Yeah.
He's like, hope everyone had a great April Fool's.
And he's like, it's still 11:52 where I'm at, or something.
Yeah, and Dana's in Vegas. He's not in Albuquerque.
Yeah, Dana replied to the tweet. Dude, that's what kind of sold me a little bit. That's what sold him. I know that.
Yeah, because I'm like, Dana, I don't know if he'd go along with the joke, but
Dana will play into it just to get some clicks,
John Jones has been my favorite fighter for ever. So I'm praying that he's just trying to use it as leverage, but I don't know. I feel like he's got to fight eventually, right? I know he seems like, he really does seem like the type of guy who he'll just walk away. He'll just be like, oh, whatever, I guess.
I think he could.
I
don't think he would
too.
have any problem walking away right now.
He has nothing to prove.
I was literally about to say, what does he have left to prove? Honestly.
I would say the only thing he has left to prove
the heavyweight thing?
is the heavyweight thing, because he's been talking about going up to heavyweight for years now, and it's never came to fruition.
Yeah. Him and Kane I wanted to see forever, but it just never came to fruition.
There were so many intriguing fights for him up at heavyweight, but I just think, the light heavyweight division really got to a point where he had beaten everybody, and there was really no interest for him down there. The only fight that I could see him taking down there is the Jan Blachowicz fight. He's never fought Blachowicz, and that'd be an interesting fight, but
I think he would kind of outclass him, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Definitely. I think John Jones would beat Jan Blachowicz pretty handedly. But I agree that it would be a tragedy if he did not fight soon, or in 2021 or 2022, because he spent the entire pandemic bulking himself up to get his body ready for heavyweight, and you can't just be like, nah, I'm not. Never mind. I'm done. I'm not getting the money I want. I'm just gonna dip.
Yeah,
you can't really do that.
And by the way, it's pretty ridiculous how much weight he just put on like that. He looks huge now.
Oh my God, he's been eating his cheeseburgers, man.
I know,
no doubt.
He was a stick for not like a stick. He was obviously a pretty bulky dude.
His legs are, his legs were sticks. That's why I never knew how he could, his legs are just so long, and that's how his leg kicks are so, devastating, because he can throw them in so many different angles.
I guess it runs in the family because his brothers are obviously NFL players, but man, I didn't think he had it in him to just bulk up to 230. Just like, yeah, I'm here. Like
that Jones family's got some different genes, man.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god.
The other brothers in the NFL too.
Yeah, Chandler and Arthur.
Yep.
Yeah, Chandler's been good for a while.
Yeah,
like
Chandler's
he's really
a monster.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Arthur, I think, won a Super Bowl with the Patriots. So that's a pretty successful family, if you ask me.
Imagine being you win a Super Bowl, you're the least successful brother in a family.
Imagine being their parents. They haven't had to work since John was
literally
25 years old.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know. And say what you want, like John Jones is 33, so you could argue that he's like right in his prime, but the window is
Towards
closing.
the end of it,
you know
for
what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah, I just hope it's. I don't know. I don't want to say it. I don't want him to go out like Anderson Silva by any means, but I think he's better than Anderson Silva was in his prime.
I mean,
so.
Oh yeah.
Is
Just
he
because
I'd
Anderson
say he's
didn't
the
have as
undisputed UFC GOAT.
I'd
What do you
say
think?
so, but I mean, I think there's an argument for like a Khabib or something like
That's
that.
true.
But I mean, in my opinion, I think so. But
I hate the GOAT conversation
because of the weight classes and
Yeah.
stuff, or what?
because of weight classes and because everybody's going to have a different answer. You
Right.
talk GOAT of basketball, 90% of people are going to tell you Jordan or LeBron, right? You
of
ask
course.
150 UFC fans, you're going to get Silva, John Jones, Habib, GSP, Demetrius Johnson. Everybody has their own.
Demetrius.
He fights tonight, actually.
I know.
And
That's
I'm
interesting.
excited for that one. It's on TNT. I'm going to be. You can watch that for free.
Yeah.
Eddie Alvarez is actually fighting tonight, too.
Really?
The guy that Connor beat up
Yeah.
for the lightweight belt. Yeah, he's fighting tonight, too.
Poor
Who the F
Eddie.
is that guy?
Exactly.
But anyways, yeah, I don't like the GOAT conversation, but I do think in terms of like resume and in terms of all around skill, it's very hard for me to say that John Jones isn't the greatest mixed martial artist of all time.
Yeah.
Am I going to say that he's the greatest fighter of all time?
That's fair.
No, because to me, I don't think that you can be considered the greatest of all time if you have succeeded by cheating. Now, I'm not saying that John Jones would have. I don't get mad at me over here, Joey. I mean, the dude cheated, so
alright,
I mean, you
It's his
put
own fault.
steroids in your body. That tells me, one, that you don't have the mental strength to make it to where you want to be. And number two, you don't feel confident enough in your ability to go out there and get the job done. That's why people take steroids. So I will never, I'll never consider Barry Bonds like a top 5, greatest hitter of all time because he took steroids. And that's a matter of opinion. Not saying that your opinion's wrong,
I
but
respect your opinion.
it's just my opinion.
I got it.
That's a fair point.
I mean, he put himself in that position. I'm not gonna sit and defend what he did, obviously. But I respect that you said he's the greatest martial artist, though. I mean, I'll take that.
You can't
that's a
deny
consolation.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is like, I'll always respect any person who walks into an octagon and willingly locks a cage door behind him and another man, knowing the dangers that surround a mixed martial arts fight.
Yeah.
But I just have a hard time respecting cheaters,
Yeah, I got
and I think, like I said, it's a matter of opinion. And I respect everything that John Jones has accomplished because, nothing can be taken away from John Jones, becoming the youngest champion in UFC history, going on the run that he's gone on. There's no denying that. But I will never put him number one as the greatest, quote unquote, fighter of all time.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, do you think that he would ever fight Reyes again?
No.
No.
John
Just
Jones
'cause
will
he's-
never fight Dominic Reyes
Just because
again.
of how close it was, or
That, and if the rematch was going to happen, it should have happened a couple months after
Was hoping
the
for
first
it,
fight
yeah.
happened. No reason to do that fight right now. Dominic Reyes has lost a fight since then.
yeah.
He has another fight coming up. I think it's May 1st. He's
Yeah.
the main event of. But no, and like you said, it was a very, very close fight, and that was a hard fight for John. He barely
Yeah.
got past that one. No reason for him to go. I don't think he's ever going back down to 205 pounds to begin with.
That's the only reason I asked is just for the excitement factor and how close that first one was. I would just want to see that run it back. But I mean, what do you think the chances of an Izzy fight ever happening? I mean, I know we just talked about him maybe never fighting again, but I mean, How do you think that would go if it did? I'll put it that way.
How do I think it would go? I'll tell you this. For the record, Israel Adesanya is my favorite fighter, and I'm actually proud of myself to be able to say this without bias towards Adesanya.
Okay.
Before the Jan Blachowicz fight, I thought that if Adesanya versus John Jones were to fight, Adesanya would be able to outclass him on the feet. Knowing what I know now, and recognizing the body of work that John Jones has put in over the course of his career against seasoned strikers, maybe not as crafty as Adesanya, but I think John Jones would be able to handle Israel Adesanya over the course of 5 rounds. I don't think he would finish him. Adesanya is very durable and he's elusive, but I definitely see a scenario where John Jones would get Adesanya to the floor, wear him out up against the cage, and win a comfortable decision over him. Now,
do you think that's a size factor or a skill factor?
I think it's a size factor.
Okay.
Israel Adesanya, skill for skill, is a top 3 fighter in the UFC.
So you think the gap between Jones and Adesanya is that close, so it really wouldn't make that much of a difference?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a gap.
I agree.
I think John Jones has the better overall well-rounded game. But, when I look at Israel Adesanya, he's a generational talent in terms of striking, and not just in MMA. I mean, a 75-5 record in kickboxing. I mean,
no
he
joke,
had, he had something like a 10-1 record in boxing. The guy has been, and those are some of those wins have come at heavyweight, have come at light heavyweight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that Adesanya can't compete on the feet with these guys at 205 pounds and at heavyweight. But I think when you bring in the wrestling and grappling aspect into mixed martial arts, I think Adesanya underestimated Jan Blachowicz' weight and the impact that size difference would have on the fight.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think since Jones is I'd say Jones is a little more skilled on the ground.
Way more skilled on the ground than Adesanya?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and since with that and just the size factor, I think he would just wear him down. I don't even think he would submit him or anything like that. I think he would just purely not. I mean, I hope the fight wouldn't go this way because I feel like it would be a little bit of a snooze fest. But I think that's how it would go.
I think a John Jones versus Israel Adesanya would be a very, very measured chess match.
Yeah, very methodical.
Because Adesanya is very dangerous.
Yeah.
Not only in the striking realm, but his takedown defense. I mean, his takedown defense is I think after the Blachowicz fight, it's still over 80%. His first fight in the UFC, he defended 12 of 15 takedowns. And he's consistently defended takedowns over the course of his career.
Yeah.
But when you make that jump in weight, especially because think about it, when Conor made the jump in weight, that's 145 to 155.
Yeah.
It's 10 pounds.
Yeah, it's whatever, yeah.
You go to 185 to 205, that's 20 pounds plus, right? So Jan Blachowicz probably weighed 220 on fight night. And Adesanya probably weighed right around 200.
Yeah.
So
there's
definitely
He's lucky to be
difference.
205 for that fight, honestly.
Right, exactly. So it's an interesting fight, and I think before the Blachowicz fight, it was one of the biggest fights that the UFC could have made.
Yeah.
But at this point, I don't see that fight coming together in the near future.
Yeah, especially when you can match length for length with the weight differential, it would be kind of unfair. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think it would happen anyway, to be honest with you. I mean, it would be smart for Izzy to take it just for the popularity aspect, I think. I mean, even though he's obviously really popular now, but that would be huge. That would be one of the biggest fights in history, I think.
It would be one of the I think both of them would be dumb not to take that fight if it was on the table.
That's true.
They've talked so much trash to each other, with interviews and over social media. I mean, the build up to that fight would be incredible.
If Izzy wins that last fight, does John take that right away, do you think? Or what do you think?
That's a very interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
I think he still asks for more than his means.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. He would have asked for a ton of money.
Probably would have asked for 10 easily, honestly.
Yeah, maybe a little.
Which is too much, but
I think it would have been easier to get John Jones to take an Israel Adesanya fight than it will be for him to take a Francis Ngannou fight.
True.
Oh yeah.
The risks, the difference in risks, the gap is incredible.
Oh,
because I don't think Adesanya would finish John Jones. If I were to predict, I would predict Adesanya by decision if I were to take him to win that fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
But John Jones would have jumped on the opportunity if it was offered to him. But the flip side of that is, would he really want to gain all that weight and then go back down?
Right.
So it's kind of a hard question to answer because we don't know, right?
Yeah, but it's a very big what if.
Right. I definitely could have seen him, flirting with the perspective or with the idea of it.
Especially because, Izzy's a you could say top 5, top 3, like, name in the sport right now.
Yeah, top 5 draw easily. In terms of active fighters, definitely.
I'd say top 2, honestly.
Yeah. That loss, there are a lot of people that like to write fighters off after a loss. And the fact of the matter is, Adesanya came out of that fight unscathed. It's not like he lost. Yes, he lost the fight, but he didn't get, demolished. He didn't get beat up. He got out-wrestled by a guy a lot heavier than him.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I guarantee you, are going to underestimate him going into his next fight at 185 pounds. And I actually think that we may see the best version of Israel Adesanya that we've ever seen.
He still has a belt right now. Yeah. It's like I don't really think that last fight does that much to his legacy, if anything.
I think I feel like a lot of people are going to forget that he's the man at 185. Like, he's the guy. But then, like, they don't realize that he fought 20 pounds heavier last fight. So it's going to be kind of funny to see.
And he got handled, but like you said, he held his own. He was able to take the fight the distance. It's not like he got knocked out or anything. Yeah. So
he clearly lost, don't get me wrong, but he definitely, like, didn't look like he was out of his element. You know what I mean? Like, he was just bigger than him.
It was a tough fight, and Jan Blachowicz, we have to give Jan Blachowicz the credit he deserves, as opposed to being like, okay, Adesanya is not as good as we thought or he has shown to be in the past.
Right.
Because fact of the matter is, Jan Blachowicz, I think Jan Blachowicz won. Israel Adesanya didn't lose that fight. Jan Blachowicz won that fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he came out with a great game plan. He knew what to exploit because he was lighter. He knew that he should be able to outlast him because he's at his normal weight and he's not and Israel's obviously heavier than he usually is. So, it's just credit to him and his coaching.
Yeah, no doubt. And we've been talking what ifs. Khabib said multiple times that he's retired. Do you really think he's done, or do you see any slight chance of him possibly coming back?
I think he's been done since October.
Yeah.
He has been done since October. He's told many media platforms that he's been done.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the difference between Khabib and a guy like Henry Cejudo. Khabib is retired, but he still trains like he's fighting.
Mm-hmm.
He's a coach, but he still trains every single day. Coaches his fighters to the max, spars with them, rolls with them, wrestles with them. He does all that stuff. And I think that Khabib is the kind of guy that is perfectly content with walking away from the sport at this point in his life, especially with his father passing away. That was his patriarch. That was the guy who made him, who turned him into who he is or was when he was still fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it will take something very, very big to get Khabib out of retirement. I don't think it happens this year. I don't think it happens next year. But say, for example, Conor McGregor beats Dustin Poirier, goes out and beats the winner of Chandler and Oliveira, wins the belt. If I'm Khabib, okay, and I'm looking at that, Conor, he's gonna be chirping at the bits.
Especially if he goes on like a run. Yeah, that'll light the fire under him like he had like 5 years ago.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And here's the thing: I think Khabib beats Conor 10 times out of 10. I don't think that fight goes any differently, no matter when it happens.
Yeah.
I think he beats anyone in that class 10 times out. No,
absolutely.
Maybe he loses like 9 out of 10 out of someone, but he basically 10 times out of 10.
Thing.
I get what you're saying. You look at the guy's dominance, and I picked Gaethje to beat him. I just thought Gaethje had the style, yes. The for lack of a better way of putting it, the unorthodox, crazier style to catch Khabib off guard with something.
Yeah.
But Khabib showed in that fight that he's also a much better striker than people gave him credit for.
Yeah.
He kind of outstruck Gaethje in that first round.
Yeah, I think people never really even thought about it because he never had to. Honestly,
right,
it was to the ground so quickly, no one even had a chance to think about him throwing a punch.
And Khabib's, top 3 greatest of all time. I hate the GOAT conversation, but if I had to do it in terms of skill and dominance, you have to put Khabib up there. And I would actually rank, I mean, in terms of, I talked about the difference between being a martial, the greatest martial artist of all time and one of the greatest fighters of all time. I'll say this very loosely, that I would probably say Khabib Nurmagomedov, and this may be recency bias, but maybe the greatest fighter of all time.
I'd say most dominant in just throughout his fights. I mean, has he he hasn't been even challenged. I wouldn't say challenged, but there hasn't been scares. There hasn't been any scares in fights.
He's lost 2 rounds in his career.
That's insane.
It's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually insane.
Yeah, I mean, and he's faced everyone you put against him. He's not gonna.
Yeah, it's not like he shies away from fights or anything.
Never.
So
I mean, I think we should talk about. I have one fight that's upcoming in May that I want to ask you about. The Chandler and Oliveira fight.
That's a great. Are you asking me what my prediction for that fight?
Well, just how do you think it'll play out?
So Oliveira is one of the most underrated lightweights in the UFC. He's a top 5 guy. He's on an 8-fight win streak now, and he has added so many tools to his game over the years. He has always been an incredibly polished submission artist. But the knock on him was whenever the fight ended up on the feet, he would kind of curl up and get overwhelmed. And he's got, in those scenarios, he's gotten finished multiple times. Oliveira recognized that, went to his team, trained the things that he needed to train, and that's why he is in the position. That's why he's in the undisputed title fight, because he deserves it. The way he beat Tony Ferguson, just the way that he beat, Kevin Lee in the fight before that. Those are both tough fights for him, and he persevered through some, like we talked about before, he weathered the storm and got through those fights to win them dominantly. On the other hand, you have Michael Chandler, who, yes, he's only had 1 fight in the UFC, but he talks about it all the time. He has over 12 years of experience in mixed martial arts, training with top guys at the highest of level. Maybe he hasn't been in the UFC, but this guy, has proven to be able to perform at a high level in mixed martial arts for quite some time now. And there's also something to be said about momentum. He has a hell of a lot of momentum and a hell of a lot of confidence coming into this fight. His post-fight interview, after beating Dan Hooker was incredible. I mean, one of the greatest promo cuts in UFC history. And he has done everything right since coming to the UFC. He's a company man. He takes the fights that are given to him. He never turns anything down. He wants to fight consistently. He wanted to fight he wanted to fight in February.
Yeah.
He wanted to fight Oliveira on the February card. Oliveira turned that one down. But to make my prediction for the fight, both guys are so diverse in their styles. Chandler, I won't say diverse. They both thrive off of pressure, but Oliveira is a guy he's not going to get you out of there with one shot. He's going to accrue damage over the course of a fight and wear on you.
Pepper you a bit,
Right. So by the end of the fight, you're like, I've lost this one. Tony Ferguson, he knew he lost it in the 3rd round. Michael Chandler, nobody's put out Dan Hooker like that.
That's what impressed me so much. When I wasn't really sure what to expect from him, obviously. But when he came in and got in, with the reach advantage, I wasn't really sure how the fight would play out because, you look at Hooker and then you look at Chandler, and, the size difference is pretty sizable, obviously.
I thought he was going to get outclassed.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to really expect, and for him to get in there like that, and his striking just impressed me so much. He was so explosive with the way he came out. Ethan will attest to this too. I was really impressed with him. I thought that he should fight Gaethje or something like that next, but Oliveira, that's no slouch, obviously. I don't know. I think it's going to be a great fight, though, honestly.
It's going to be a fantastic fight. And it's kind of going to be a matter of which guy can impose their will on the other and get the better of that other guy before the other one gains momentum and gets in their flow.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I think Charles Oliveira, he's a guy that if he's not flowing, if he has to face adversity, he's proven before in his career that he's crumbled through adversity.
Yeah.
And Michael Chandler is one of those guys who he's very durable. He isn't going to shy away from a firefight.
No, not at
and
all.
I think that he's going to come out, walk Charles Oliveira right down from the minute the bell rings. And I could definitely see Chandler finishing Oliveira in like the 3rd or the 4th round.
Yeah.
Chandler can match him wrestling wise. I think he has more knockout power than Oliveira.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And while Oliveira is a more diverse martial artist, Chandler is so good at the simple things.
Yeah.
You know, setting things up with feints. For example, the way that he went to the body and came over the top with that shot that dropped Hooker. I mean that is picture
Textbook.
perfect
Yes,
stuff.
exactly.
You know, that stuff that you have to train and drill. It almost has to become like second nature to be able to set those things up.
Yeah. That's something only a seasoned vet would do. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And for Chandler to be able to go in there in his UFC debut and do that against a veteran and Dan Hooker and a top 5 guy leads me to believe that Charles Oliveira is going to have some problems, not only with the pressure, but also the confidence and the momentum and the aura that Michael Chandler brings to the table.
Exactly. I definitely have Chandler winning that fight.
And then we also have Leon Edwards, Nate Diaz coming up. I don't know. Diaz is one of my favorite fighters. He's a fan favorite. You know, like I'd argue also the UFC is better when he's an active fighter.
I feel like he's one of those guys, either you love him or you hate him.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, I love the guy.
Yeah.
I have like
no
3 posters of him in my room. I have a picture of him choking out McGregor, you know, in their first fight.
Yeah.
I'm all in on Nate Diaz.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I will be rooting for him with all my heart at 262.
Yeah.
It's history. First non-title 5-round fight, co-main event. But I don't think he's going to win. I think Leon Edwards is going to go in there and beat him handedly. Nate Diaz is at a point in his career, and I hate to use this connotation, but he is a journeyman. And I don't... I'm not necessarily using that connotation negatively. You know, you have to be skilled and have a certain amount of charisma and name equity to you to be able to
still
get,
be relevant.
You know, think about the things that he's done the past couple of years. The UFC had a belt made because he wanted the belt made.
Yeah.
A $50,000 belt.
Yeah.
This guy holds a lot of name equity and holds a lot of stock within the UFC. And you're right, Ethan. The UFC is a better place when Nate Diaz is active and
No
fighting.
doubt. Yeah, no
definitely.
doubt.
And his fights are like some of the most exciting fights you can ever see because he's relentless.
You know they're going to be entertaining every time.
He might have one of the best chins we've ever seen.
Oh my god!
And then he just
And
has
the
most
in-fight antics and just
and he has the most cardio. I mean, I've never seen him get tired. Like he like it's physically impossible. I feel like at this point for him to ever get tired.
It's almost like Nate Diaz has to get beat up a little bit before he can get going. You know,
Yeah,
like
seriously.
he starts and he's like, "All right, come on, hit me a couple times so I can wake up, and then I'm gonna come at you." You know?
He's one of those guys that like hit me, hit me so I can get mad, and then he all of a sudden just turns into like some sort of maniac, like he's just like out of his mind.
There's no forgiveness in this sport, man. It's a crazy, grueling sport.
Him and his brother Nick have been exciting for a while. I mean, Nick obviously has been out of it for a bit. But
Yeah, Nick's never coming back.
There was a video of him talking about a comeback recently. I forgot who they were promoting some fight or something. I'm like, I don't see that.
I was always a
happening.
fan of Nick though. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean,
no, I love both of them for sure.
There's nothing better than the Diaz brothers.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
exactly.
storied. I mean,
The slaps, the
yeah,
in-fight
I
slap,
mean,
like
they're
so
both
unorthodox,
storied guys.
man.
they're legendary. I
It's
mean, that's
just
what I would even put them at.
Pure
point 'em as.
entertainment. It's awesome to see them fight, honestly.
Yeah.
So, but let me tell you, if Nate Diaz wins, the UFC is going to become, or the UFC's welterweight division is going to become very, very, very fun.
Oh, yeah.
Because Nate Diaz, if he wins, he's going to be able to make the UFC a heck of a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
'Cause then he can start getting big time fights again with like justifiable big time.
Leon
fights,
Edwards
you know?
is top 3 guy. If he beats a
Exactly.
number 3 guy in the world, he can fight a top. It's justified, like you said.
Exactly. Because I mean, if you give him that fight, then other contenders are gonna complain because it's like, why does this guy deserve it? But then if he beats Leon, then it's just like you can give a reason for it.
Exactly. You guys get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then like the whole eyebrow thing with Masvidal, it's like, I don't know, man. It's frustrating to see that cut keep opening up.
Yeah, and I'm glad that he's taken over a year off to let that heal,
Yeah.
especially because a lot of the damage or a lot of the shots that he's going to see from Leon Edwards. You know, Nate Diaz is a southpaw, and so is Leon Edwards. So the high kicks, the straight lefts, they're all going to be coming right towards that eye. So Nate needs to do, in my opinion, you know, and talking as though, you know, a fan of him that wants to win the fight, he has to understand that he likes getting hit. He can't get hit too much early in this fight because Leon has the ability to put him out, even though I don't think it will happen.
Right.
If he opens up that cut and that blood starts trickling into that eye, I don't want to see another Nate Diaz fight be stopped by a doctor.
It's just so unfortunate, you know? It's like...
Yeah, because we know he's not going to get finished usually. I mean,
No.
I know he's not going to get finished. So
Yeah.
I mean, if he's getting finished, you have to put him to sleep. He's never going to shy away. He's never going to quit.
He will die in that ring, like,
Absolutely.
seriously.
And I respect it, man.
Yeah.
You know?
It's awesome to see. It's
He's
like...
shed a lot of blood for the UFC.
Oh, yeah.
And
the most, maybe, out of any fighter ever.
Him and Clay Guida are fighting for most bloodshed for sure. So
Clay Guida, I love that guy, man.
for real.
What's his nickname?
Man, I forget. I don't know, but I don't think I've ever seen a Clay Guida fight without blood. So
Oh, that's gonna bug me.
he's one of my all-time favorites. Like he's just the most exciting guy ever.
I mean, we also have Masvidal Usman at the end of this month.
Excited for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Usman, you know, Masvidal, I think he'll make it a little more exciting than the first one was, just because he, you know, has had more time to cut the weight and prepare his body for a 5-round championship fight against Kamaru Usman. But I think Usman takes that fight pretty handily. I think he's going to. I actually think that he's going to give Masvidal something to worry about on the feet. Over the past year or so now, he's been working with one of the best striking coaches in the game, Trevor Whitman, out in Colorado, who, you know, is Rose Namajunas' coach, Justin Gaethje's coach. So, you know, they have striking down over there to a T. And Usman's striking has improved significantly. We saw it in the Gilbert Burns fight. He wasn't putting guys out like that, you know, before the Colby and the Burns fights. So I think you're going to see Usman dip into a deeper bag of tricks than he did in the first fight back at 251, just because he feels more confident in himself and his abilities overall as a martial artist.
Yeah, no doubt.
I think so. I think Usman's definitely just more skilled than Masvidal, honestly. Masvidal's always got that excitement factor, though. And I'd always give him a chance for a knockout.
Oh, yeah,
course, so.
always. I mean, there's always that's the crazy part about MMA, right? There's always that chance for a one-punch knockout.
The puncher's chance, yeah.
Or a knee, in Masvidal's case.
Yeah, that's true.
No doubt. Let's see, what else do we have coming up? Is there any other really big-name fights? I mean, we've talked about a lot, you know?
Not in the next, month or so.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the summer's shaping up to be exciting for the UFC. You know, looking down, we have Usman Masvidal. Then you have the Oliveira and Chandler with Nate. Then after that, you have the rematch between Brandon Moreno and Davidson Figueiredo. They actually announced a couple days ago that they opened the door ever so slightly on Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis being put on that June 12th card. From what I hear, the timing doesn't really work out for Francis Ngannou, but I'm not closing the door on that just yet. I think if they paid them the right amount of money and gave them that main event slot, which they obviously would, they could get that deal done. Then you got Conor and Poirier right after that. And then August, you know, who knows what that has to bring. But 2021, I mean, has been a very, very exciting year for the UFC. They've had a couple of fights, you know, big fights that have ended in, you know, unfortunate ways. But other than that, they've put on some great cards. Everything's been exciting. They've handled the COVID protocols, you know. I would say they've handled them pretty well with the exception of a couple things. But, you know, the UFC, and they're getting back into arenas now. It's just really exciting to see how the UFC is built off this pandemic.
Yeah, there have been a couple of unfortunate stoppages to fights that we saw. There was 2 disqualifications that I can remember, though, the poke to the eye and then what was the other
knee.
one? The illegal
Jan
knee.
versus Sterling.
Yeah.
Man, let me tell you, that was Piotr Jan is a guy I talked about earlier. UFC 232 was like the first card I watched from top to bottom. Jan was on, I think he was the first fight of the night, like the early prelims. And ever since then, like he's been one of my favorite guys. I've been following his
Jan
career.
is electric.
Oh my God, he's incredible. And he was absolutely ragdolling Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate,
Yeah.
that the fight, and not even just as a Jan fan, but as a fan of the sport, you never want to see someone win a belt that way. And Aljamain Sterling has done some good things over the course of his career, but it's hard not to call him a paper champ because he didn't win the fight. The other guy made a mistake that allowed him to win the belt, and I have no problem with him taking the belt. He should have, but also understand that the rematch is probably going to look a little bit similar to the first fight. I don't think
the way that it was going.
I replied to your tweet that one time about that. I said Sterling would adapt a little bit. I think he would only. I think it would be slightly closer just because he's seen him. But I think Jan will still win.
But where can he adapt? That's the thing. In the striking realm, it's like Aljamain Sterling holds the record for landing the most strikes in UFC history without dropping or knocking out an opponent. What can you really do to improve that? I mean, sure, you could start bulking up, but then you're gonna have a hard time cutting weight.
I think he would just make the round count maybe a little closer.
And one judge had him winning that fight. That judge, I would call that person crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
We'll see.
Jan's striking is unreal.
And I don't like how Sterling kind of handled himself in the days following that fight either.
No.
That just rubbed me the wrong way completely.
It kind of looked like a showboating.
He didn't know how to handle himself.
Because at the time, I mean, people were arguing, and I even said, I'm like, is he milking this a little bit? Like, just because of the way that the fight was going, I was like, there's no doubt that shot caused damage, and it was clearly illegal. But I'm like, I don't know, part of me felt like he went down just to say that he won that fight. And then the way that he handled himself in the days after, like I said, the showboating, I was like, come on, man.
Yeah.
You did not win that fight.
I don't want to say he he stayed down.
We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, because
I don't
he
think
actually
he did.
Had a concussion or something. So
I mean, if Jan would have landed that knee legally, I think it would have put Sterling out. I mean, the first right hand that Jan landed, it dropped Sterling.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't.
He was on the ground.
There was
a lot.
reason he was on. He was down like that.
He underestimated Jan's power going in, definitely. But I will say that I don't think Aljo was milking it at all. I think that he handled the situation, in the moment, the way that he should have handled it.
Mm-hmm.
There was no reason, and he shouldn't have got up and started fighting again, because that would have looked terrible on the UFC and the referee. I mean, he was hurt. That fight should have been stopped.
And if he looked dazed when he got up too, that would have been pretty brutal.
Yeah, that would be a massive controversy.
Because Jan may have just finished him literally seconds after.
Oh, it would have been seconds after.
Yeah,
all he would have to do was land one clean shot to the jaw, and
then there would have been people like, they should have stopped the fight earlier.
He was concussed or something like that.
And especially Dana. I mean, he's not going to want to take chances if it's going to put a bad spotlight on the UFC. So
as they say, ball don't lie.
Yep.
Rematch. Jan's coming back. He's going to retake what's his, and he's going to run the bantamweight division for a little bit. I'm excited for it.
Yeah. That could kind of wrap up the UFC talk. If you guys want to talk about March Madness just a little bit, because
I think I think we can definitely touch on it just because the crazy game that we got to see. With,
I was blown away. Honestly, that was unreal.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's crazy that Baylor. I mean, Baylor was a great team. Don't get me wrong, because they were 1-2 the whole year. I mean, everyone knew that Baylor was.
And weeks ago, we talked about that. Like, I think it was before the tournament even started. We said Gonzaga and Baylor are clearly the two best teams.
Yeah, and then there was the teams like Michigan and Illinois that were hanging around like 3-4, but it was clearly who was 1-2. I think Baylor they just caught fire at the right time. Honestly, I think they're both extremely skilled teams. So I think Baylor starting out like 5 for 5 or 6 for 6 on threes just kind of exploded, and then they ran away.
I was blown away. Just the dominance. I mean, they went up by 20 within the first 5-6 minutes, and then after that, it was kind of just the closest Gonzaga got was 9 points.
Yeah, they were ferocious on defense. They put so much pressure on ball. It was ridiculous. They ran a zone that clearly forced them to make someone else beat them besides Drew Timme in the paint.
Yeah.
So they kind of forced it that they wouldn't be able to get the ball into him, or else he would get trapped. So they had to get Jalen Suggs the ball, which is obviously a great option.
Yeah,
a 5-star player,
no
top
doubt.
3 pick in the draft. But he kind of he didn't really have anyone else to lean on. It felt like.
And Gonzaga struggled from 3 the entire game, and Baylor was shooting lights out.
Yeah,
and from the free throw line, they struggled too, massively.
I think Gonzaga had 8 or 9 turnovers before Baylor had the first one. So.
Yeah,
I think that UCLA game might have taken a lot out of Gonzaga too. After watching that finish and how hard it was for them to win that game going into the championship, I was kind of leaning Baylor because I feel like they had more confidence in just a deeper team going into that game.
They handled Houston like very easily too.
Very easily. They were up 40-18 in the first half.
Yeah.
I mean, props to them. First championship in school history. Got to be happy for them.
It's crazy.
But nothing to hang your hat. Nothing to hang your hat on if you're Gonzaga, right?
Amazing
incredible season.
That's their best season ever. I mean, it would have been the first tournament win for Gonzaga as well. So it was awesome to see two teams. No Duke this year, no Kentucky, and you know what? That's honestly nice to see.
Yeah, no, it's a nice refresher because Duke or Kentucky's just gonna get the class with like 4 or 5 stars probably in a couple years anyway. So they'll be all right.
Exactly. I don't know. I was just kind of disappointed in the way that the game played out. I was expecting a closer game. And the point you brought up, my dad said the same thing. He said that the UCLA game may have taken a lot out of Gonzaga.
Yeah.
I thought it would have lit a fire under them a little bit because the game was so close. UCLA was an 11 seed, and Gonzaga would be like, you know what, we are the best team in the country. But clearly, I guess they're not. I
think it would have made a huge difference if, I think Gonzaga, since they run a strict 7-man rotation. So, them playing, like having a game that's so intense like that 2 days earlier with only playing 7 guys, so they're playing a lot more minutes than a team like Gonzaga who's like 9 or 10 deep.
Yep.
No doubt.
They definitely a couple of their guys may have lost their legs.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like towards the middle of that game.
Crazy end to a crazy tournament. It's just funny that like with all the upsets, we saw the 2 best teams in the end play each other. We got 2 1 seeds, so it's like I don't know. This was one of the most enjoyable tournaments in recent years, if not probably the most entertaining one I've ever seen.
That's why they call it March Madness.
Even without the fans, like the environment was awesome this year.
Yeah.
And with not having it last year, it just made it that much sweeter to watch.
I definitely would have liked the championship game to be closer, but I mean, what more can you really ask for?
And I can't complain with how the tournament went this year.
Yeah, exactly.
I said we wrap it up there.
Yeah,
we're gonna keep it a little shorter this week. Thank you, Jack, for joining us. This was a great experience.
Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. Love talking UFC with you guys.
Of course. I mean, you're welcome on the show anytime.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Only if there's no John Jones slander.
Listen, no slander. I just can't respect a cheater.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. You could find these episodes on the library SoundCloud. They're also posted on the Glacier. We'll link Scraptitude, which is your podcast, in the description. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Peace.